All right, y'all. You're Locked On Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman, and today I'm joined by Alan Strk, a contributor at the Falcoholic, former co-host of this Locked On Falcons podcast. And today we are giving you our rapid reaction to the Falcons' 23-20 win over the Cleveland Browns in Week 4.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me, Aaron Freeman, humble host of Locked On Falcons, this illustrious podcast, aka Sirius Black, aka Mr. Drew. And of course, we thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. It's, of course, free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms: Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube, and you'll get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. And today's episode of Locked On Falcons is sponsored by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. So I'm here with Alan Strk, Falcoholic contributor. And, we're a little giddy coming off a Falcons win, second consecutive defensive stand to seal the victory for the Falcons. We'll get into the conversation about how the Falcons established the run with their power football run game on offense a little bit later. We'll talk about AJ Terrell as one of the standouts. We'll talk about Marcus Mariota, not necessarily a standout, all that and more. But Alan, let's get into that defensive stand. It was, 2.5 minutes to go, fourth quarter. The Falcons had just gone up with a 45-yard field goal from Younghoe, of course, clutch kicker to build their lead to 23-20. And you're sitting there, I know I'm sitting there with a pit in my stomach thinking, oh God, we got to get a defensive stand again. We got lucky last week. I don't think we can do it 2 weeks in a row, but they did it 2 weeks in a row, right? You had that back shoulder throw to David Bell that got 20 on D. Alford. He did redeem himself a couple of plays later.
Did you think that was offensive pass interference? I have to mention that. I really thought that was OPI.
I wasn't really paying that much attention, to be honest with you.
Well, listeners, as you can see, all right.
But then you had the 2-minute warning. Then the Browns were able to convert a 3rd and 1 when the Falcons jumped off sides, and even then they couldn't stop the QB sneak from Jacoby Brissett for like the 15th time.
He's a big individual. Life happens.
Then you got an Arnold Ebiketie pressure that forced an incompletion. Then you had Lorenzo Carter balling up a screen to Kareem Hunt. The Browns could not complete a screen to save their life in this game.
I want to mention he did a great job of recognizing screens throughout the entire game. He didn't get much pressure, but Lorenzo Carter plays with awareness.
Absolutely. Then that was followed up by a Grady Jarrett sack for the second week in a row on the sort of final drive. And then D. Alford redeemed himself from the pseudo offensive pass interference, blown coverage, whatever you want to call it, with an interception, snatching it from maybe it was Bell. It doesn't matter who it was. He shut him down, locked them down, and got the game sealing win with a minute left. Alan, what were your thoughts on the Falcons' defensive stand there to close out a second consecutive win for the Falcons?
I think I was fairly confident just because of the fact that the Browns had no timeouts and they didn't have much of a downfield pass game to begin with. Because with the no timeouts, it's like, all right, they can't depend on the run, which is what they've been doing for the majority of the game. Other than the first drive where they had some success with play action, like they didn't do much in the passing game. Like Cooper was a non-factor. Peoples-Jones didn't do much. Njoku had that one drive. So I was like, barring something dramatic, crazy pass interference, like it's going to be hard to see how Brissett's going to put together a drive. I know, granted, the Falcons, we've seen before, they play zone and quarterbacks find those soft openings, Jameis Winston week 1. But I just think personnel-wise, it's like, all right, Falcons aren't necessarily going to generate pressure because the Browns O-line is one of the best in the league, and we haven't really seen much. And I don't think DPs are going to dial up many blitzes. But given how well the secondary played throughout the game, I'm just like, it's going to take a lot for the Browns to get into decent field range. I know Cade York's already one of the best in the league, so they kind of had to hang in there. But if they could force a third long and force Jacoby Brissett to make a tight window throw, like really get him under adversity, because I think Jacoby Brissett's a good game manager, but if you force him to make difficult throws, he crumbles. And we saw it there. He kind of an errant throw, and D offered those ball skills, man. If you watch those CFL tape, oh man, you saw it often. So when he rose up to get it, I was like, yep, there it is. And it's fitting. And how about this, man? Another Alford we have having game-winning interceptions. Not quite Robert Alford 2015 against Washington, but almost as glorious.
Almost as glorious. So it sounds like, Alan, you feel like the culture has changed when the Falcons are facing a backup caliber quarterback. He is not going to drive the length of the field in the fourth quarter to get the game-winning touchdown.
Geno Smith, Jacoby Brissett, the resume speaks for itself.
Okay. All right. Because I can remember like Brian Hoyer and some of these guys from back in the day that were not much better than Geno Smith and Jacoby Brissett, and still were able to.
But man, we're talking 8 years ago, 2 regimes ago. Like, come on. And see, we want the Falcons defense, but I'm pretty thrilled with how the secondary has held up throughout this season. I know, okay, week 1 was a little bit rough, and look, the Rams are going to scheme up what they scheme up, the Cooper Cup. But I think the last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot of promising things. It's just, I don't know, when it comes to handling play action, to get torn apart. But we saw today, like that fourth down stop, which you look back on that first drive, that was a game changer. That was a big reason why they won that game. The fact that they did not allow any points on a drive, and they pretty much forced Jacoby Brissett to throw it out the end zone. It's a tremendous job. And we talked about the third down where Richie Grant showed great awareness, plucked in the hole, and wrapped up Nick Chubb, which, hey, if you could wrap up Nick Chubb, we get into it. Not many people were wrapping up Nick Chubb in this game, but Richie Grant definitely did it at opportune times. So salute them.
I think that was the one time they actually wrapped up Nick Chubb. We'll talk more about the defense, the bend but don't break. We'll talk about AJ Terrell and part of that Falcons secondary that really stood up as we continue today's episode. But coming up, we'll talk all about the offense. We'll switch gears and talk about the power football and how Caleb Huntley is the man of your dreams right now. And we'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's episode. But before we get there, I gotta tell you about Prize Picks, a fun new way to play daily fantasy. You just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. And the great thing about Prize Picks, you're not competing against people. It's just you versus the projections. And whether it's NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, they have you covered. It's fast, it's easy, it's safe. It's currently in operation in over 30 states in the US and Canada. All you have to do is download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com and sign up to play a fun new way of playing daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That means if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100 in free money to play with. Don't forget to use that promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, at sign up for that instant deposit match up to $100. So continuing today's episode here with Alan Strk, my good friend of Locked On Falcons, talking all about this win over the Browns. But we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen, and make sure you check out the NFL key predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. The Locked On local experts will give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games each and every NFL weekend, including Sunday and Monday Night Football. Plus, you'll get betting advice from the field's leading experts in BetOnline. Follow NFL key predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL, available on an Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Alan, let's talk about power football. The Falcons were able to put up 202 rushing yards on 35 carries, eclipsing the Browns' 177 rushing yards for 35 carries. I joked with the Locked On Browns folks earlier this week that this game may be a race to 200 yards rushing, and the team that may wind up winning the game will be the team that wins that race. And it wound up being proven true once again. I am the prophet of your dreams. But I think really for me, the key for the Falcons was that late third quarter drive after the Browns had taken that 13-10 lead. And the Falcons offense had basically not been functional really since the end of the first quarter up to that point. We'll talk a little bit later about how, they kind of were trying to throw the ball maybe a little bit too much. We'll get into that conversation when we talk about Marcus Mariota later in the episode. But at the end of the third quarter, they were just like, let's get back to basics. 10-play drive, 75 yards, 10 runs, 0 passes. You had Tyler Algier had 2 carries for 21 yards, but it was really Caleb Huntley that really should have stood out, getting his second action of the season, practice squad call up. I think one of the concerns a lot of people had was like, how healthy is Cordero Patterson going to be into this game? Algier had a good day, particularly he had a late 40-yard gain later in the game that really sort of flipped field position for the Falcons. But I think Huntley's kind of the man of the hour with, 8 carries on that drive, 54 yards. I think he finished with 10 carries for 56 yards in the touchdown. What were your thoughts on that drive and the Falcons running game on this day?
Not to be a buzzkill, but were you shocked that Kyle Pitts didn't get called for a hold on that 40-yard run? I thought he got away with a really blatant hold. I saw it, and they threw a flag, but it was a hold on the, I don't know what. The Browns had a lot of backup D linemen. I can't remember their names, but like Pitts, it looked pretty egregious.
Well, I mean, that's why, when you go back to the offensive pass interference, like, oh, the Falcons didn't get a call. Like, they got every call in this game because they should have called that
You
flag.
think so? Denzel Ward got away with a few?
Okay. If you say so.
The
Falcons had like 2 penalties in this game, I think, whole time. So
that's fair. I just seen a few things, but I was trying to figure out as the drives were going, like, what are the Falcons doing so differently schematically? Because the first half they really couldn't get much going, other than the Patterson cutback for the touchdown. I'm just like, they didn't really do much on the ground, and they weren't operating much from the pistol. It wasn't anything really too creative schematically, but I don't know. I saw they were running to the right side a little bit more. Like, I thought Drew Dahlman had his best game of the year. Chris Lindstrom continuing to have playing at an all-pro level, and your buddy Caleb McGarry Island, he's out here. Oh, he's out here. So, and I think Keith Smith had a couple of standout blocks. It was just weird because I was just trying to figure out, like, how is this happening now? Like, what are they doing? But I just think ultimately, they got a big creative running, different zone looks. But ultimately, I just think offensive line, dominated a backup D line because let's call it how it is. Browns were down 3 starters, and the Browns go into the season had a lot of questions on the interior. And I think the Falcons attacked them because I remember like the first half, Ansu Karamoa had like 4 or 5 standout plays. Like, he was flying to the ball, but then they just started setting the tone. And Huntley, I don't know, he just brought that juice. I know you hate that term, but like every time he ran the ball, like it really reminded me of Jason Snelling. He just has this quirky style to him. And he's not particularly explosive, but he has just his power. And like every time he was running the ball, there was like yards after contact, which I know we'll talk about the Browns. But with Huntley, it just seemed like he was always going forward and he always found the lane. And I think with a big part of this Falcons running game is like you need to have that vision. I think Algier at times he struggled because he's kind of not being as decisive. Like he's just kind of like running straight forward rather than looking for a lane. But I think he's improving on that slowly. But Huntley, it just seemed like every decision he was making was the right one. And it really blew me away. It's just the fact that we have someone that was getting reps in the third quarter preseason games is now running the ball 8 times on a drive in a regular season game. It's probably one of the most random, beautiful things I've ever seen on a football field.
Our very own Sam Congato right here. Folks.
Oh my God.
Finally, we got Sam Congato, monkey off our back with Caleb Huntley getting the call up from the practice squad. Go back to 05 if you guys don't know that reference. But
don't go back to 05. It's a bad year.
But yeah, because like one of the things I noticed so far this season was a lot of Algier's runs were in between the tackles. And, when Patterson would run it, he would run it a lot more outside. And so I'll be curious to go back and watch this drive on the All-22. Exactly. It did feel like, Huntley did get a mix of both runs between the tackles and attacking the edges. You did see Algier get a couple of outside runs later in the game. That 40-yard run was a nice play that he had bounced out. I think he also had like a 14-yard run at one point where he was able to get to the outside. And so, I do think, again, we'll see what the film says if it confirms this, but I do think when the Falcons are, running particularly behind that right side with Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom able to get going, again, not going to put them on the Tyson Clabo, Harvey Dahl level quite yet, but it does feel like that's kind of the strength of this offensive line when they can run the football.
And I definitely think he deserves a shot because I saw him shine a little bit. Parker Hesse, I know you're probably going to do like a film breakdown of his 2 minutes and 20 seconds by Wednesday. But I thought he stuck out. And he just gets so many snaps. But I think that's the advantage what the Falcons have. They could operate in whether it's 12 or 21 personnel. And given the flexibility they have within their formations and just pound teams. It was just so unexpected because the first half they were just really ineffective. It was just like, all right, nothing's really going on here. I think maybe that's why they're a little bit more dependent on the pass. But given Arthur Smith's background and just his overall philosophy, I'm just like, early third quarter, I'm like, they're not really running the ball. Something has to change because they're having this drop back style. Mariota's accuracy is all over that place, and it's just like they got to start running the ball. And who would have thunk it? Caleb Huntley, just bruising out there. And I think it's obviously a feel good moment, but I think it's also a bit not vindication. Maybe it is kind of vindication for Arthur Smith, just because he's someone that always preaches about running the ball, and people kind of groan. They're like, "Oh, this team hasn't run the ball 4 or 5 years. Have you seen the O-line? How can this team run the ball?" But say what you want with the O-line, say what you want with the personnel, but they ran the ball, and maybe it was against collection of backups, but for them to do that under that kind of adversity and see Arthur Smith make those in-game adjustments that we didn't quite see in his first season, I think that's something that's arguably the most encouraging thing coming out of this victory.
Yeah, I mean, they were a top 5 running attack going into this game, so I'm assuming coming off a 200-yard game, they're probably in the top 3 by the time we get to Monday and whatnot.
I just want to mention, though, do you think this is most important just because Mariota had zero effect on the ground game in this game compared to games against New Orleans and Seattle?
Because
he had a big impact against New Orleans, maybe not so much Seattle, but this game, him running the ball was relatively ineffective, or non-existent.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought this was most impressive just because the Mariota factor was not there in the ground game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, people can say, as you just said, like, oh, well, the Browns were beat up, but it's like, if you're a good running team, you should be able to put 200 yards on a quote unquote beat up Browns front.
Yeah, there you go.
And the way that this offensive line has been playing like that, this is exactly what you wanted to see. So as you said, kudos to Arthur Smith, basically making that adjustment and saying, look, let's get back to what we do well, which is run the football. And I think it was critical that guys like Huntley and Algier stepped up, because Patterson had been basically the sort of the guiding principle of this offense and the foundation of this offense for the first 3 weeks, and him dealing with that knee injury today, they needed to have somebody step up and fill those shoes. And I think certainly Algier and Huntley did. And we will continue the conversation about this win, talking a little bit more about a standout on defense with AJ Terrell shutting down Amari Cooper. And then we'll circle back and talk a little bit about, what's going on with Marcus Mariota as it relates to, the Falcons being able to run the football and not quite having the passing game. And we'll get Alan's thoughts on that as we continue today's episode, guys. But I got to tell you about my friends over at Built Bar. It's been a while since I've been plugging Built Bar on this podcast. And for those of you that have missed the Built Bar, we changed up the promo code here on Locked On Falcons, longtime sponsor of the show. Now the promo code is Locked On 15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's LOCKEDON 15 for 15% off. And you haven't taken a trip over to built.com to see all the new flavors. They got the German chocolate, they got the mud pie, they got the cougar tail, but you can also get your tried and trues like cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut almond, cherry barcia, mint brownie, all your favorites, peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, raspberry, so much and more. So you got to head on over to built.com to see all the delicious flavors. And if you guys are like, what is this Built Bar thing that Aaron's talking about? Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar, guys, right? And it's not just that it tastes good, it's good for you. It's low in sugar, low in calories, low in carbs, high in protein, high in fiber. Built Bars are all covered in 100% real chocolate, and you're getting those limited time flavors like German chocolate and mud pie, as well as those tried and trues. So head over to built.com, use that new promo code Locked On 15 for 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code Locked On 15 for 15% off at built.com. So, Alan, wrapping up today's Locked On Falcons rapid reaction in week 4, we've talked about the offense. We talked about the defensive stand. You mentioned the secondary standing out. And I think the standout of the secondary for the second week in a row was AJ Terrell. being asked with that tough assignment to shadow Amari Cooper. He did that last week and really kept DK Metcalf in check, particularly in man coverage. Did an even better job against Amari Cooper today because Metcalf had a couple of plays in zone against Terrell and others last week. Cooper did nothing today. Nothing. He had 4 targets, 1 catch, 9 yards, absolutely shut down. All the credit goes to AJ Terrell in that. People were talking a lot about AJ Terrell and sort of those first 2 games where he gave up a number of touchdowns in those games. What are your thoughts on AJ Terrell kind of rebounding and putting his best foot forward against one of the better wide receivers in the NFL today?
I just thought it was a little harsh to criticize because you look at the first 2 games, it's like Michael Thomas contested catch, like Michael Thomas, that's like one of his biggest specialties. And then, okay, Allen Robinson beat him clean on the fade. That's fair. But it's just like, it's in the red zone. Anything can happen in the red zone. And if you want to look at the red zone, I think the biggest standout play was Mark Cooper ran a really crisp whip route. And Mark Cooper, we know how good a route runner he is. I remember like he ran it pretty precisely, but Terrell absolutely read it. And I knew that was Brissett's primary read. And then he had to go to a second read, which maybe was Donovan Peoples-Jones, and he pretty much threw out the end zone. So I think just Terrell there, especially in the red zone, given his first 2 game struggles there, pretty much saved the touchdown, and I think that drive ended in a field goal. So once again, it's those type of game-changing plays, but just in general, like I think we saw in the last drive, like Cooper was complaining about not getting a penalty. Like Terrell was very physical, and that's what you want to see from him because he always plays that edge, like we saw in his rookie year, going up against the likes of Michael Thomas and Keenan Allen. Yeah, he had his struggles there, but Terrell's that alpha male. You need that in that secondary, and for him to be the tone setter there was huge. And given that we've seen Cooper the last 2 weeks have monster games, and Stefanski really making a priority to get him the ball, Cooper was a total non-factor. And I love the fact that Dean Pease is now having Terrell shadow number 1 receivers because we didn't quite see that last year, and now we're fully seeing it, and it's paying off because there's no one in the Browns receiving corps that you fear besides Cooper, and match them up properly, and they did that.
Yeah. I also thought Casey Hayward had probably his best game of the season. Obviously, you got the big play from D. Alford at the end of the game to sort of wrap up. What are your thoughts on Hayward's play so far this season? I know he hasn't quite lived up to a lot of people's expectations as that number 2 corner.
I think he's been steady. Maybe Bill remember he's a little older, and I don't know if he's more comfortable playing zone at this point in his career. Because if you remember last year with the Raiders, he played in Gus Bradley's defense. They play a lot of cover 3, so maybe it's been a bit more of an adjustment now for him. But like obviously the New Orleans game was rough, allowing that catch over the top to Jarvis Landry. But I think Hayward, I don't think he's underwhelmed. I just think he is what he is at this point. At least he brings a steady presence because I just feel like the Falcons, when it comes to the number 2 corners, not to bring up Rob Alford's name again, but like Rob Alford was like the last steady number 2 corner. So, I've been fine with it. But, how about the safeties? I know they missed their fair share of tackles at times, and Richie Grant took a bad angle on that touchdown run. But, Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins both made game-changing plays.
Yep. Someone who did not make game-changing plays was Marcus Mariota.
We're not telling more of the defense. We're just gonna let their awful tackling. We're not gonna get on how just despicable that tackling display was. Or we're not gonna do that.
I mean, do you got anything else you want to add to it?
Are you a little concerned about Michael Walker's play? I thought it was very concerning.
I mean, his tackling has always kind of been bad. So from that standpoint, I'm not too concerned that he continues to have issues as a tackler.
Did you see the all-22 angle of the Chubb touchdown? I know Grant took a bad angle, but I thought he was also largely responsible for that touchdown.
Yeah. I did not like that rep either for him. Yeah. But given, the history of Falcons linebackers being out of position against the run, it's nothing new from recent history.
Yeah, I just thought him and Evans were very poor games. But when you allow over 150 yards rushing, it's like, okay, your linebacker play is probably going to be abysmal, and D-line isn't going to be much better. Although I do like the fact that I don't think he should be getting 35, 40 snaps a game, but like Taquan Graham, he every week he's showing something.
I thought Graham played well. I thought he did. I mean, obviously, you can't heap too much praise on the defense, a front 7 that gives up 177 yards rushing, but he stood out a number of times, not necessarily the case with the linebackers in this game. So I do feel like the defensive line will come out looking a lot better than the linebackers do when it comes to when evaluating the run defense on film.
And the rookie edge rushers, they definitely deserve a mention.
Yeah, Ebiketie came through. Someone asked a question about Ebiketie last week, and like what after a big week 1 and then kind of a quiet week 2, and I think he made a couple of plays. Malone had a nice tackle on that end around to Njoku and whatnot, and
all through multiple blockers.
Yeah, you mentioned Carter playing well, so it was nice to see the front sort of step up and make some plays, even though obviously Nick Chubb had more than his fair share of plays. But Alan, I gotta talk about Marcus Mariota, man. You're delaying my complaining. Okay, boy. Mariota 7 for 19, 139 yards, an interception.
Chris Winkie-esque.
Yeah, I mean, and what's crazy about it is like I thought he played probably his best first quarter of the season.
Yeah,
do you think that's fair? He wasn't perfect, but like I thought he
was efficient. Like those throws to Pitts, and he hit London one time very nice. I think Zacchaeus as well. Like that first drive was just, even though it ended up only in a field goal, like everyone was getting involved.
Yeah, and then I was like, because I remember telling the Locked On Falcons Discord over the weekend when we did our little Saturday symposium thing. Go check that out in the Discord, the link in the description. And I basically, someone asked me about Mariota, and I was basically like, I think this is the game because you have the injuries on the Browns front. This is the game where we should see the best version of Mariota because he shouldn't be under any pressure. And the Falcons, I think receivers should have an advantage against the Browns secondary. And it seemed like that's how the game was starting. And then just like in the second quarter, in the third quarter, the Falcons kind of went to a pass-first offense. I had the breakdown. In the first quarter, the Falcons ran the ball 7 times and passed the ball 9 plays, so they had a pretty good balance there in their first 15, 16 plays. And in the second quarter, they didn't really have the ball. The Browns just kind of possessed the ball, so they only really had 1 run and 2 passes in that quarter. Then in the third quarter, before we got to the 10-play drive, spearheaded by Huntley and Algier, the Falcons ran the ball 4 times and threw the ball 8 times. So you had this span where the Falcons were, throwing the ball on 2/3 of their plays in the second and third quarter, and the Falcons just could not move the offense and move the ball really at all. Then after that 10-play drive, and then in the fourth quarter, the Falcons ran the ball 8 times and threw the ball 3 times. And it just kind of seems like the conclusion is the Falcons offense works when they can basically limit how much Marcus Mariota has an impact on it, at least today. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Like I think it was Nate Tice said it on the Flag Show that no team runs more plays at max protect than the Falcons. So that just kind of shows you. I think they're running play action like 48% of his dropbacks. So you could tell they're really coddling Mariota. And to be fair, the first 3 weeks, it's been relatively effective. Like you see, like I think its average depth of target was like 15 yards, and he's getting those easy chunk plays. But I do think you're underselling the Browns secondary. They have a lot of playmakers back there. I should think that's probably the strength of their defense. So
I would agree with that. They just hadn't really played all that well this year. That's
okay. That's fair. And that's why I was like, as you look at it, I'm just like, man, they're not getting the same amount of plays. And like, well, when I started really getting concerned that third down, where I thought, pretty sure it was a rub route where London was going underneath, and it was a sure first down. Mario, you just look at his footwork, like he just back trailing and just so sloppy, and then like one hops to London. I'm just like, oh boy, this is a sign things to come. And look, I think London could have better on the interception, but at the end of the day, it's like Denzel Ward pretty much ran that route. Mariota hit him in stride. Like we could complain about Drake London, maybe could have fought for the ball better, but that interception is 100% Mariota. Would you agree?
I would agree. Now, also, by the way, for those of you that checked out the All 22 review this past week, that was a play where Mariota initially turned his back to the defense. So we'll see if the Falcons switch that up a little bit. Although we did get another questionable snap. Although, did you put that on Drew Dahlman or Mariota mishandling that snap?
It was high.
It feels like it was like here.
Yeah.
And it felt like Mariota should have caught it, but at the same time, like the snap shouldn't be here.
I would. Yeah, I gotta tend to agree. I think I put that a little bit more on Dahlman. It's just so frustrating. This happens almost every week. Like how can a functional offense be like this? Like this is the NFL. Like I feel like we're back in 2015 with Mike Person. Like it can't be like this.
Yeah, I was talking about this the other week, and it's like this feels a lot worse than what.
Yeah.
Mike.
From your perspective, what was the most alarming thing about Mariota in this game? Like, what was there a certain moment or just overall play where just like he's becoming a liability?
I mean, that one hop that he had was kind of just like, okay, that was kind of it, where it was just like, hey, all right, like this was an easy throw for you to complete, and you just missed it.
Yeah.
And like, I don't expect Mariota to be perfect or anything like that, but like when the easy throws are there, you gotta make those, the layups.
Yeah. Even I thought maybe it was the camera angle, but that deep pass to Zacchaeus in the fourth quarter, that even looked awkward. And you look at the all 22 angle, like Zacchaeus was open the whole play. It was like he was running like a simple over, and I think they found the soft spot in the cover 3. But even then, like Mariota made it look difficult. So I don't know if it was just like a loss of confidence, but it was just bizarre. And if you can't depend on a quarterback to be able to play with under some kind of adversity, I just don't know how you could trust him, because it just seems like Mariota, if the game plan is not circulated right for him, he crumbles, and kind of saw it get here in this game.
Fair enough. Well, we've complained enough after a win. I know we have a reputation of doing it, or at least
I'm buzzing, but it's just you got to call out for how it is. Like,
yeah.
I think I saw a stat where the Falcons, this was the lowest amount of completions they've had in a win since 2001. So I'm going to assume that was Vic's rookie year, or maybe it was Doug Johnson. I don't know, but
I think wasn't Chandler still around? Didn't he start that year, 01?
I don't know, Vic, but Vic was like being substituted.
Yeah, they were kind of flipping him and Vic a lot, which I know there's a lot of people that would enjoy that if the Falcons brought that back with a certain rookie quarterback on the team.
Yeah, is the countdown on right now?
The countdown is definitely on, but this win certainly will probably going to replace your quarterback after a win. So Mariota is, we'll see what happens. Obviously, things are going to get challenging these next couple of weeks against some tougher defenses. I don't know if the running game is going to be able to carry the team quite to the degree as it has, at least on Sunday, against some of these upcoming opponents. But Alan, as we sort of close things out, any other thoughts that you want to add before we let the people go?
Look, I want to end this on a high note. I don't want to talk about Todd Bowles and D'Amico Ryans probably watching this film and getting very excited the fact that they could just blitz Mariota will and force 3 turnovers. We're not going to end it like this. It was a thrilling victory. It was power football at its finest. We saw Jason Story 2.0 come. It's just a beautiful story. Like however you want to break this down, Caleb Huntley, D offered 2 players that were pretty cool preseason standouts. You do not expect them to become difference makers in the game, or at least make a difference making plays, and they both did that. And I think it was very encouraging to see Algier run hard and make up plays, because I think he's been a little underwhelming the first 3 games. Well, he didn't play week 1, but the previous 2 games, like it just seems like he's been running behind blockers and kind of moving forward. Now we actually got to see some looseness. I like the 3rd and 12. Thought it was good to see him showing some pass catching ability, but I just think the biggest thing I think from this year compared to last year, just we're seeing young players really emerge. Like last year, besides Pitts, Lindstrom, and Terrell, we didn't really see too many standouts when it comes to young players. Like Hawkins had a moment here and there in rush, but now we're seeing like young players really putting together like 6-7 really good plays where it's just like, okay, this is a game changer. Like we talked about the rookie edge rushers. I thought even Troy Anderson had a couple of good moments. So I just think the ascendance of the young players, great secondary play, and just Arthur Smith making those adjustments, and Arthur Smith showing why he was considered one of the best play callers at one point. And who knows, maybe he's going to build back his reputation as one of the best play callers in the league, because today was one of his best games as a Falcons coach. And that's a lot to take out of it. And look, 2-2, this team's around. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's cool. Like, NFC's weak. I think the Falcons have totally earned their right to be considered this plucky, feisty team, and we're going to get entertainment. And regardless of how it comes, I think these first 4 games have showed, like, okay, this team's here to stay, and we don't have to worry about games being over by the 3rd quarter. Watch the next 2 weeks, things might change. But besides that, we got full confidence.
Okay, we'll leave it on that note, guys.
What about you? Let the people know your opinion, man.
No, I think you said it. I don't really have anything else to add to that. Like I was impressed with this. I like the fact that the Falcons, like my thing is when, as you said earlier, like, pass, run, I don't really care. Just do whatever you do and do it well. And if the Falcons are going to be this team that's going to run the ball 35 times a game, I'm fine with that. If you do it well, like they did on Sunday. And so
that's Arthur
today,
Smith, man. Like, we
yeah,
want to look at
so
Arthur
I'm
Smith.
fine with it. Like I like the fact that this, as you mentioned, you got these young players stepping up. They're checking boxes, right? We're in the midst of a rebuild, and this team, looks like they're ahead of schedule right now on this rebuild. Again, like no one's going to sit here and be like, "Hey, man, you beat two juggernauts in the league against Seattle and Cleveland," but like you got to find ways to win these football games, and the Falcons are finding ways to win these football games, and I'm excited that they got these 2 wins. If for no other reason than I happen to predict that the Falcons would be 2-2 at this point with this outcomes heading into the season. But I'm not going to be petty to end today's episode. So,
and as I mentioned, third down defense, they were one of the worst coming to the game, allowing 48% to be converted. Today, 5-14. I thought that third down defense made a huge difference, and that's the type of stuff you need to win these close games. So
bend but don't break. 1 for 3 in the red zone as well. The Browns were. So the Falcons were 2 for 4. So it's like we got 7 one more time than they got, and they settled for 3, and that probably was the difference in the game. And guys, that's going to do it for us here on today's Rapid Reaction. Really appreciate you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Tomorrow's episode, because we had Alan on today, we probably won't be joined by a guest, but we'll talk about stuff on tomorrow's episode. Probably look at some of the PFF grades and make it a quote unquote Analytics Tuesday in that regard, and revisit some of these topics that we discussed, revisiting some of these drives and whatnot on tomorrow's episode. But for your second listen, in addition to Locked On Sports Atlanta, where you might have missed me and Jarvis being extra petty, if you want a little bit more of that Aaron Freeman pettiness, go check out Locked On Sports Atlanta. Jarvis being petty on that episode. Shout out to the Cleveland folks here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where Jarvis was directing his pettiness. But that was the postcast on Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. You can find it on the Locked On Falcons audio feeds, and Locked On Sports Atlanta is the home of the Locked On Braves postcast. So the Braves got a game going on in an hour or so from where Alan and I are recording this, so go check that out. But guys, also check out Peacock and Williamson. Brian Peacock, former NFL scout Matt Williamson, are giving you that expert NFL analysis every single day in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Guys, appreciate the win, appreciate the listens, appreciate the views, all that and more. Subscribe, all that. Alan, thank you. Alan Strk on Twitter, no longer the _. Check him out at falcoholic.com as well. Really, guys, appreciate it. Have a great Victory Monday.